7 Panzer IVs cresting the ridge, a lone Sherman sitting in the open, engine idling, 76mm gun traversing too slow. The German commander sees an easy kill. His gunner centers the crosshairs. Then the American tank lurches forward, stops dead for 2 seconds, and the Panzer's shot screams past, striking dirt. Before the German can reload, the Sherman fires. The Panzer erupts. What happened next would rewrite armored doctrine for a generation. Normandy, August 1944. The bocage country of northern France is a maze of hedgerows and sunken lanes. Each field is a fortress. Each corner hides death. American armored units push inland from the beaches, but progress is measured in yards, not miles. The Germans know this terrain. They have fortified it, and their tanks, the Panzer IV and the dreaded Panther, wait in ambush behind every tree line. The Sherman tank is the workhorse of the Allied advance. It is reliable, fast, and produced in numbers that stagger the imagination. American factories churn them out at a rate of 2,000 per month. But the Sherman has a problem. Its 75mm gun cannot penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther at combat ranges. Its own armor, sloped but thin, offers little protection against the German 75mm and 88mm guns. Tank crews call it the Ronson because it lights up first time, every time. The math is brutal. In head-to-head engagements, Shermans die at a rate of 3 to 1, sometimes 4. The crews know it. The commanders know it. The generals who order the attacks know it, but the war must be won. So the Shermans keep rolling forward, and the men inside keep dying. Tactics evolve out of necessity. Crews learn to use terrain, to flank, to mass fire from multiple directions. Infantry tank coordination improves. But in the chaos of the breakout from Normandy, when armored columns race through gaps in the German lines, engagements happen fast. Too fast for flanking, too fast for coordination. Sometimes it is just one Sherman against whatever is waiting around the next bend. Into this grinding calculus steps a staff sergeant from Ohio. He commands a Sherman in the 3rd Armored Division, one of the spearhead units pushing toward the Seine. His tank is a 76mm variant, slightly better armed than the older 75mm models, but still outclassed by German armor. His crew is experienced. They have survived Normandy, which alone makes them veterans. They have learned to read terrain, to anticipate ambush, to shoot first and shoot straight. But the sergeant has learned something else, something the manuals do not teach, something that will save his life and the lives of dozens of tankers who adopt his method. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. His name was Harold Gruber, born in 1921 in a small town outside Cleveland. His father worked the steel mills. His mother raised 5 children in a 3-bedroom house that smelled of cabbage and coal smoke. Harold was the middle child, quiet, observant, good with machines. He rebuilt his first engine at 14, a Model A Ford his uncle had given up on. By 16, he was working weekends at a garage, earning money for technical school. The war interrupted his plans. He enlisted in 1942, trained at Fort Knox, learned to drive, load, and command a Sherman tank. The training was thorough but abstract. They practiced gunnery on stationary targets, maneuvered through obstacle courses, drilled on maintenance and repair. No one mentioned what it felt like to watch a German shell punch through the hull of the tank beside you. No one explained how to survive when you were outgunned and outnumbered. Gruber shipped to England in early 1944, part of the massive buildup for the invasion. He landed on Omaha Beach on D+3, after the worst of the fighting had passed, but while the sand still smelled of cordite and death. His first combat came a week later, a skirmish near Carentan. His tank took a glancing hit from an anti-tank gun. The shell gouged a furrow in the hull, but did not penetrate. Gruber's gunner destroyed the gun position with 2 rounds. They drove on. Over the next 6 weeks, Gruber fought through the bocage. He lost count of the engagements. His tank was hit 3 more times, each time surviving through luck and angle. He learned to hate the Hedgerows, the way they channeled tanks into kill zones, the way a single Panzer Faust team could ambush from 50 yards. He learned to love the open ground, where the Sherman's speed and numbers could be brought to bear. But he also learned something strange. In the chaos of close-range tank battles, German gunners often missed their first shot, not by much, inches, feet. The shell would scream past, strike a tree or a wall, explode harmlessly. Then the Sherman would be dead because by the time it returned fire, the Panzer had reloaded. Gruber started watching, counting, timing. He noticed that German tanks, particularly the Panzer IV with its long 75mm gun, had predictable gunnery sequences. The gunner would track the target, the commander would call the range, and the shot would come. But there was a lag, a fraction of a second between the moment the gunner settled his crosshairs and the moment he fired. If the target moved during that lag, the shot would miss. The problem was moving at the right moment. Too early, and the gunner would adjust. Too late, and the shell would already be in flight. The window was tiny. Less than a second, maybe half a second. Gruber did not have instruments to measure it. He had instinct and observation, and he had a theory. What if he stopped? The problem facing American tank commanders in 1944 was not just armor or firepower, it was timing. A Sherman on the move was a difficult target. Its speed, 25 to 30 miles per hour on roads, made accurate gunnery at range challenging for both sides. But stopping to fire meant becoming a stationary target, and a stationary Sherman was a dead Sherman. Doctrine called for firing on the move when possible, using the tank's stabilizer to engage while maneuvering. But the stabilizer was unreliable. At speed, accuracy dropped dramatically. Most kills came from stationary or slow-moving tanks. The crews who survived learned to find cover, stop briefly, fire, and move again. But in meeting engagements, where both tanks saw each other simultaneously, the advantage went to whoever fired first and hit. German gunnery was excellent. Their optics were superior. Their training emphasized precision. A Panzer crew spotting a Sherman at 800 yards could put their first round within inches of the target. If the Sherman was moving predictably, the gunner would lead the target and fire. If it was stationary, he would center and fire. Either way, the shell arrived in about 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Gruber fixated on that number. 2 seconds from trigger pull to impact. 2 seconds in which the target existed in the gunner's mind as a fixed point in space. If the target moved during those 2 seconds, the shell would miss. But continuous movement was predictable. A gunner could lead a moving target. What he could not predict was a sudden stop. Gruber began experimenting. In the quieter moments between engagements, he practiced with his driver, roll forward at speed, then on command, brake hard, full stop, hold for 2 seconds, then accelerate again. The driver thought he was crazy. The loader asked what the point was. Gruber did not explain. He was not sure himself if it would work, but he kept practicing. The theory was simple. If a German gunner was tracking a moving Sherman, leading the target, and the Sherman suddenly stopped, the shell would pass ahead of it. The gunner had already committed to the shot. He could not adjust in the fraction of a second before firing. The round would miss forward. Then, during the 2 seconds it took to reload, the Sherman could fire back. It required nerve. You had to trust that the enemy was about to shoot. You had to time the stop to the instant before he fired. Too early, and he would wait, adjust, fire at the stationary target. Too late, and the shell would already be on its way to your hull. The margin was impossibly thin, but Gruber believed it was there. He believed because he had watched the Germans shoot. He had seen the pattern. He had counted the seconds. August 12, 1944. Gruber's platoon was advancing through open country south of Mortain. The German counterattack at Mortain had failed, and American forces were exploiting the chaos, pushing east toward Argentan. The terrain was rolling farmland, more open than the bocage, but still punctuated by woodlines and villages. Intelligence reported scattered German armor retreating toward the Falaise Gap. Gruber's tank was in the lead. His platoon leader had been killed 2 days earlier, and Gruber, as senior surviving NCO, had taken command of the 4 remaining Shermans. They moved in a loose column 50 yards between vehicles, turrets, scanning. The Germans appeared without warning. 7 Panzer Thwappiers emerging from a tree line 600 yards ahead. They had been waiting in ambush, but something had spooked them. Perhaps they saw more American armor than expected. Perhaps their orders changed. Whatever the reason, they were moving into the open, presenting flank shots, but also bringing their guns to bear. Gruber's heart stopped. 7 against 4. The Panzers were already turning, their long guns swinging toward his column. He had seconds, maybe less. He keyed his radio. All units halt. Engaged nearest targets. The Shermans stopped. The Panzers kept moving, their turrets still traversing. Gruber watched the lead Panzer, saw the gun stabilize, saw the slight pause that meant the gunner was settling his aim. "Driver, forward, now!" His Sherman lurched ahead. The Panzer fired. The shell screamed past, missing by feet, striking the ground behind them. Halt! The Sherman stopped dead. 2 seconds. Gruber's gunner had the Panzer in his sights. Fire! The 76-millimeter round punched through the Panzer's turret ring. The tank shuddered and stopped. Smoke poured from the hatches. "Driver, forward!" They moved again. Another Panzer was turning toward them, gun rising. Gruber watched, waited, felt the moment approach. Halt! The Panzer fired. The shell passed ahead, close enough to feel the heat. Fire! Another hit, another kill. The engagement lasted less than 3 minutes. In that time, Gruber's 4 Shermans destroyed 5 Panzer IVs and drove off the remaining 2. His own tank accounted for 3 kills. He took no losses. The after-action report was terse. 4 M4A 376mm engaged 7 Panzer IV. 5 enemy destroyed. 2 fled. No friendly losses. But the division's armored warfare officer read it twice. Then he requested a meeting with Staff Sergeant Gruber. The debrief took place in a farmhouse basement that smelled of old wine and fresh dirt. The officer, a major with a silver star and a limp from a wound at St. Lo, listened without interrupting. Gruber explained the timing, the halt, the 2-second window. He drew diagrams on the back of a supply requisition. The major asked questions. Technical questions. How did you know when to stop? How did you judge the moment? Gruber struggled to articulate it. Instinct, he said. You watch the gun. You see when it settles. You feel when the shot is coming. Then you stop. Not before, not after, exactly then. The major nodded slowly. He had seen enough combat to recognize the difference between luck and skill. This was skill. Dangerous, counterintuitive, but repeatable skill. He asked if Gruber could teach it. Gruber said he could try. Over the next 2 weeks, as the division pursued retreating German forces toward the Seine, Gruber conducted informal training sessions. Tank commanders gathered in fields and farmyards, listening to the staff sergeant from Ohio explain his technique. Some were skeptical. The idea of stopping in front of an enemy tank seemed suicidal. Others were desperate. They had lost friends, lost crews, lost faith in their ability to survive. They would try anything. The key, Gruber emphasized, was not the stop itself. It was the timing. You had to read the enemy gunner. You had to recognize the moment of commitment, the instant when the shot was inevitable. Then, and only then, you stopped. The German shell would pass. You would fire. He would die. Practice helped. Gruber ran drills using a stopwatch and a whistle to simulate enemy fire. Drivers learned to brake smoothly to avoid the violent lurch that could throw off their own gunner's aim. Loaders learned to have the next round ready before the first shot was fired. Gunners learned to acquire targets faster to fire the moment the tank halted. It was not a magic solution. Some commanders could not read the timing. Some froze at the critical moment. Some tried the technique against opponents who did not follow the expected pattern. A few died, but enough succeeded that the word spread. Through the 3rd Armored Division, through neighboring units, through the informal network of tank crews who traded tactics like currency. By late August, intelligence officers noticed a shift. Sherman loss rates in meeting engagements were declining, not dramatically. The war was still brutal, and German armor remained deadly, but the ratio was improving. Where 3 Shermans once died for every Panzer, now it was closer to 2. Still not parity, but closer. Captured German tankers, interrogated after the Falaise pocket collapsed, mentioned confusion, American tanks that stopped at the wrong moment, shots that missed when they should have hit. The interrogators filed the reports without understanding their significance. But Gruber understood. His technique was working. The Germans were noticing. The war moved faster than Doctrine could follow. The 3rd Armored Division crossed the Seine, raced through Belgium, reached the German border by September. The fighting intensified. The Siegfried Line, the Hürtgen Forest, the brutal winter of 1944. Gruber fought through all of it. His tank was destroyed twice. He transferred to new vehicles, rebuilt crews, kept teaching. By the Ardennes offensive, the 2-second halt had become part of the division's unofficial tactical repertoire. Veteran tank commanders used it reflexively. New replacements learned it from the men who had survived. It was never codified in official manuals. It was too dependent on judgment, too risky for standardized training, but it lived in the oral tradition of armored warfare, passed from crew to crew, tank to tank. Gruber survived the war. He was wounded in March 1945, shrapnel from an artillery barrage that killed his loader and damaged his hearing permanently. He was evacuated to a hospital in Paris. then shipped home. He received the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with clusters, and a Purple Heart. The citations mentioned gallantry and leadership. They did not mention the 2-second halt. He returned to Ohio, to the steel town where he had grown up. He worked at the same garage where he had rebuilt that Model A Ford. He married, raised children, lived quietly. He did not talk about the war much. When people asked, he said he had been lucky. When his children pressed for stories, he told them about the French countryside, the food, the kindness of civilians. He did not tell them about the tanks burning, or the men screaming, or the smell of diesel and blood. But other tankers remembered. In the years after the war, veterans of the 3rd Armored Division held reunions. They told stories, traded memories, argued about dates and places, and they talked about the staff sergeant who taught them how to survive. Some of the stories grew in the telling. 7 Panzers became 10. 3 kills became 5. The 2-second halt became a legend. In 1962, a military historian researching armored tactics in World War II tracked Gruber down. He was living in a modest house, working as a supervisor at an auto parts factory. The historian asked about the technique. Gruber, uncomfortable with attention, gave brief answers. Yes, he had developed it. Yes, it had worked. No, he did not consider himself special. He had simply observed and adapted. That was what soldiers did. The historian pressed for details. How many engagements had Gruber survived using the technique? Gruber did not know precisely. Dozens, perhaps. How many kills had he achieved? The record said 12 confirmed. Gruber thought the number might be higher. He did not keep count during the fighting. He was too busy trying to stay alive. The interview was published in a military journal. A few armored officers read it. Most did not. By 1962, tanks had changed. The lessons of World War II seemed distant, almost quaint. Guided missiles, night vision, computer-assisted gunnery. The 2-second halt belonged to another era. But the principles survived. In armor schools at Fort Knox and elsewhere, instructors taught a concept called engagement timing. The idea that the moment of firing was not just about accuracy, but about synchronization. That reading an opponent's intent could provide the critical edge. They did not cite Gruber. They did not know his name, but they taught what he had discovered in the chaos of Normandy, that warfare is not just about firepower. It is about rhythm. Harold Gruber died in 1989. He was 68 years old. A heart attack, like his father before him. His obituary mentioned his service, his decorations, his years at the factory. It did not mention Panzers or 2-second halts or the burning fields south of Mortain. At his funeral, a dozen old men stood in the back row. They did not speak during the service. They did not need to. They had served with him or been trained by him or survived because of a technique he had devised in desperation and taught with patience. After the burial, they gathered at a bar and raised glasses to the staff sergeant who had thought instead of panicked, who had studied the pattern of death and found within it a rhythm of survival. One of them, a retired colonel who had commanded a tank battalion in Korea and Vietnam, wrote a letter to the Army's Armor Center. He described Gruber's contribution, the 2-second halt, the lives it had saved. He argued that the innovation deserved recognition, formal acknowledgement in the historical record. The letter was filed, acknowledged, forgotten. The Army had newer tanks, newer tactics, newer wars. But among tankers, The story persisted. It appeared in memoirs, in unit histories, in oral interviews archived at museums. The details varied. Some accounts placed the engagement at different locations. Others attributed the technique to different commanders. But the core remained. A man who, in the worst moment, calculated instead of froze. Who turned the enemy's precision into a weapon against them. Who taught others not just what to do, but how to think. The Sherman tank is long obsolete. A few survive in museums, their tracks still, their guns silent. The men who crewed them are nearly all gone now. The fields of Normandy are green again, the hedgerows trimmed, the bunkers crumbling into the earth. But the principle endures in every armor school, in every tank battalion, in every crew that learns to read an opponent's timing. The lesson is the same. Know your enemy, know his rhythm, and know that in the space between his certainty and your response, there is room to survive. Gruber never sought glory, never claimed to have changed the war. But in 2 seconds of calculated stillness, in a field surrounded by death, he found a truth that no manual had written, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop, that the pause between heartbeats can be a weapon, that survival belongs to those who understand the rhythm of killing and dare to break it. The Panzers are gone. The Shermans are gone. But the idea remains, passed down through generations of tankers who will never know the name of the staff sergeant from Ohio, who first proved that timing, not armor, not firepower, but timing, could be the difference between dying and driving home.